It was about the beginning of September 1664 that I, among the rest of my neighbours, heard, in ordinary discourse, that the plague was returned again in Holland, for it had been very violent there, and particularly at Amsterdam and Rotterdam in the year 1663, whither they say it was brought, some said from Italy, others from the Levant, among some goods which were brought home by their Turkey fleet. Others said it was brought from Candia, others from Cyprus. It mattered not from whence it came, but all agreed it was come into Holland again. The pain of the swelling was in particular very violent, and to some intolerable. The physicians and surgeons may be said to have tortured many poor creatures, even to death. The swellings in some grew hard, and they applied violent drawing plasters or poultices to break them, and if these did not do, they cut and scarified them in a terrible manner. In some those swellings were made hard partly by the force of the distemper, and partly by their being too violently drawn, and were so hard that no instrument could cut them, and then they burnt them with caustic, so that many died mad with the torment, and some in the very operation. In these distresses some, for want of help to hold them down in their beds or to look at them, laid hands upon themselves. Some broke into the streets perhaps naked, and would run directly down to the river if they were not stopped by the watchmen or other officers, and plunge themselves into the water wherever they found it. It often pierced my very soul to hear the groans and cries of those who were thus tormented, but of the two this was counted the more promising particular in the whole infection. For if these swellings could be brought to a head and to break and run, or as the surgeons call it, to digest, the patient generally recovered, whereas those who, like the gentlewoman's daughter, were struck with death at the beginning, and had the tokens come out upon them, often went about indifferent easy till a little before they died, and some till a moment when they dropped down, as in apoplexies and epilepsies is often the case. Such would be taken suddenly very sick, and would run to a bench or bulk or any convenient place that offered itself, or to their own houses if possible, and there sit down, grow faint, and die. This kind of dying was much the same as it was with those who die of common mortifications, who die swooning and, as it were, go away in a dream. Such as died thus had often very little notice of their being infected at all, till the gangrene was spread through their whole body, nor could the physicians themselves know certainly how it was with them, till they opened their breasts or other parts of their body, and saw the tokens. There is no room to doubt but that the misery of those that gave suck was in proportion as great. Our bills of mortality could give but little light in this, yet some it did. There were several more than usual starved at nurse, but this was nothing. The misery was where they were first starved for want of a nurse, the mother dying, and all the family and infants found dead by them, merely for want. And if I may speak my opinion, I do believe that many hundreds of poor helpless infants perished in this manner. Secondly, not starved, but poisoned by the nurse, nay, even where the mother has been the nurse, and having received the infection has poisoned, that is, infected the infant with her milk, even before they knew they were infected themselves. Nay, and the infant has died in such a case before the mother. I cannot but remember to leave this admonition upon record if ever such another dreadful visitation should happen in this city, that all the women that are with child or that give suck should be gone, if they have any possible means out of the place, because their misery, if infected, will so much exceed all other people's. I could tell here dismal tales of living infants being found suckling the breasts of their mothers or nurses, after they had been dead of the plague, of a mother in the parish where I lived, who, having a child that was not well, sent for an apothecary to view the child, and when he came, as the relation goes, was giving the child suck at her breast, and to all appearance was herself very well. But when the apothecary came close to her, he saw the tokens upon that breast with which she was suckling the child. He was surprised enough to be sure, but not wanting to fright the poor woman too much, he desired she should give the child into his hand. So he takes the child, and going to a cradle in the room, lays it in, and opening its clothes, found the tokens upon the child too. And both died before he could get home to send a preventive medicine to the father of the child to whom he had told their condition. Whether the child infected the nurse mother, or the mother the child, was not certain, but the last is most likely. Likewise of a child brought home to the parents from a nurse that had died of the plague, Yet the tender mother would not refuse to take in her child, and laid it in her bosom, by which she was also infected, and died with the child in her arms, dead in the sand. It would make the hardest heart move at the instances that were frequently found of tender mothers tending and watching with their dear children, and even dying before them, and sometimes taking the distemper from them and dying when the child for whom the affectionate heart has been sacrificed has got over it and escaped. The like of a tradesman in East Smithfield, whose wife was big with her first child, and fell into labor, having the plague upon her. He could neither get midwife to assist, nor nurse to tend her, and the two servants which he kept fled both from her. He ran from house to house like one distracted, but could get no help. The utmost he could get was that a watchman, who attended an infected house shut up, promised to send a nurse in the morning. The poor man, with his heart broke, went back, assisted his wife what he could, acted the part of the midwife, brought the child dead into the world, and his wife in about an hour died also in his arms, where he held her dead body fast till the morning, when the watchman came and brought the nurse as he had promised. And coming up the stairs, where he had left the door open and only latched, they found the man sitting with his dead wife in his arms, and so overwhelmed with grief that he died in a few hours afterwards, without any sign of the infection upon him, but merely sunk under the weight of his grief. I have heard also of some who, on the death of their relations, have grown stupid under the insupportable sorrow, and of one in particular who was so absolutely overcome with the pressure upon his spirit that by degrees his head sank into his body, so between his shoulders that the crown of his head was very little seen above the bone of his shoulders, and by degrees, losing both voice and sense, his face, looking forward, lay against his collarbone, and could not be kept up otherwise, unless held up in the hands of other people, and the poor man never came to himself again, but languished near a year in that condition and died. Nor was he ever once seen to lift up his eyes or to look upon any particular object. Dwell a great while upon the calamities of this dreadful time, and go on to describe the objects that appeared among us every day, the dreadful extravagances which the distraction of sick people drove them into, how the streets began to be fuller now of frightful objects, and the families to be made even a terror to themselves. But after I have told you, as I have above, that one man, being tied to his bed and finding no other way to deliver himself, set the bed on fire with his candle, which unhappily stood within his reach, and burned himself in his bed. How another, by the insupportable torment he bore, danced and sung naked in the streets, not knowing one ecstasy from another. I say, after I have mentioned these things, what can be added more? What can be said to represent the misery of these times more lively to the reader, and to give him a more perfect idea of a complicated distress? Scarce a day or night passed over but some dismal thing or other happened at the end of that Harrow Alley, which was a place full of poor people, most of them belonging to the butchers or to employments depending upon the butchery. Sometimes heaps and throngs of people would burst out of the alley, most of them women, making a dreadful clamor, mixed or compounded of screeches, cryings, and callings to one another, that we could not conceive or to endure. I had in family only an ancient woman that managed the house, a maidservant, 2 apprentices, and myself, and the plague beginning to increase about us, I had many sad thoughts about what course I should take, or how I should act. The many dismal objects which happened everywhere as I went about the streets had filled my mind with a great deal of horror, for fear of the distemper itself, which was indeed very common in itself, and in some more than others. The swellings, which were generally in the neck or groin, when they grew hard and would not break, were so painful that it was equal to the most exquisite torture, and some, not able to bear the torment, threw themselves out of windows, or shot themselves, or otherwise made themselves away. And I saw many dismal objects of that kind. Others, unable to contain themselves, vented their pain by incessant roarings, and such loud, lamentable cries were to be heard as we walked along the streets that would pierce the very heart to think of, especially when it was to be considered that the same dreadful scourge might be expected every moment to seize upon ourselves. I remember, and while I am writing this story, I think I hear the very sound of it. A certain lady had only a daughter, a young maiden about 19 years old, and who was possessed of a very considerable fortune. They were only lodgers in the house where they were, the young woman, her mother, and the maid had been abroad on some occasion. I do not remember what, for the house was not shut up. But about 2 hours after they came home, the young lady complained that she was not well. In a quarter of an hour more she vomited, and had a violent pain in her head. Pray God, says the mother in a terrible fright, my child has not the distemper. The pain in her head increasing, her mother ordered the bed to be warmed, and resolved to put her into bed, and prepared to give her things to sweat, which was the ordinary remedy to be taken when the first apprehensions of the distemper began. While the bed was airing, the mother undressed the young woman, and just as she was laid down in the bed, she, looking upon her body with a candle, immediately discovered the fatal tokens inside her thumbs. The mother, not being able to contain herself, threw down the candle and screeched out in a frightful manner that was enough to place horror upon the stoutest heart in the world. Nor was it one scream or one cry, but the fright, having seized her spirit, she fainted first, then recovered, then ran all over the house, up the stairs and down the stairs, like one distracted, and indeed really was distracted, and continued screeching and crying out for several hours, void of all sense, or at least government of her senses, and, as I was told, never came thoroughly to herself again. As to the young maiden, she was a dead corpse from that moment, for the gangrene which occasions the spots had spread her whole body, and she died in less than 2 hours. But still the mother continued crying out, not knowing anything more of her child, several hours after she was dead. It was so long ago that I am not certain, but I think the mother never recovered, but died in 2 or 3 months after. This was an extraordinary case, and I am therefore the more particular in it, because I came so much to the knowledge of it. But there were innumerable such like cases, and it was seldom that the weekly bill came out, but that there were 2 or 3 put in frighted, that is, that may well be called frighted to death. But besides those who were so frightened as to die upon the spot, there were great numbers frighted to other extremes, some frightened out of their senses, some out of their memory, and some out of their understanding. A poor unhappy gentleman, a substantial citizen's wife was, if this story be true, murdered by one of those creatures in Aldersgate Street or that way. He was going along the street raving mad, to be sure, and singing. The people only said he was drunk, but he himself said he had the plague upon him, which it seems was true. And meeting this gentlewoman, he would kiss her. She was terribly frightened, as he was only a rude fellow, and she ran from him, but the street being very thin of people, there was nobody near enough to help her. But when she saw that he would overtake her, she turned and gave him a thrust so forcibly, he, being no Greek, she pushed him down backward, but very unhappily. She, being so near, he caught hold of her and pulled her down, and getting up first mastered her and kissed her, and which was worst of all, when he had done, told her he had the plague, and why should she not have it as well? She was frightened enough before, being also young with child, but when she heard him say he had the plague, she screamed and fell down in a swoon or a fit, which, though she recovered a little, yet killed her in a very few days, and I never heard whether she had the plague. I heard of one infected creature who, running out of his bed in his shirt in the anguish and agony of the swellings, of which he had 3 upon him, caught his shoes on, and went to put on his coat. But the nurse resisting and snatching the coat from him, he threw her down and ran for her, ran downstairs and into the street, directly to the Thames in his shirt, the nurse running after him and calling to the watch to stop him. But the watchman, frightened at the man and afraid to touch him, let him go on. Upon which he ran down to the Stilliard stairs, threw away his shirt and plunged into the Thames, and, being a good swimmer, swam quite over the river, and the tide being coming in as they call it, that is, going westward, he reached the land of Knoxville in about the Falklands there, where landing and finding no people there, it being in the night, he ran about the streets there, naked as he was for a good while, hearing for a good while, but just at that interval I saw two lights coming over from the end of the minaret, and heard the bell ring, and then appeared a dead cars that followed coming over the streets. So I could no longer resist my desire of seeing it, and went in. There was nobody, as I could perceive at first, in the churchyard or going into it, but the buriers and the fellow that drove the car, or rather, led the horse and cart. But when they came up to the pit, they saw a man go to and again, muffled in a brown coat, and making motions with his hands under his cloak, as if he was in great agony. And the buriers immediately gathered about him, supposing he was one of those poor, delirious, desperate creatures that used to pretend, as I have said, to bury themselves. He said nothing as he walked along, but 2 or 3 times being very deeply loud, and sighed as if he would break his heart. When the buriers came up to him, they felt he was not a person affected and desperate as they had observed above, or a person distempered in mind, but one of the crowds with a dreadful weight of grief and grief, having his wife and 7 of his children, all in the crowd was going with him. And he followed in an agony and excess of sorrow. He mourned heartily, as it was easy to see, but with a kind of masculine grief that would not get itself tears, and finally desiring the buriers to let him alone, said he would not see the bodies till the end of the very day, so he left them to tell him. But no sooner was the cart turned around when the body shot into the pit promiscuously, which was a surprise for him, for he at least expected he would have been decently laid in, though indeed he was afterwards convinced that it was impractical. I say no sooner did he see the sight than he cried out aloud, unable to contain himself. I could not believe myself, but I went back into the 2 steps, and followed myself. Distemper arising from natural causes, we must consider it as it was really propagated by natural means, nor is it all the less a judgment for its being under the conduct of human causes and effects. For, as the divine power has formed the scheme of nature and maintains nature in its course, so the same power thinks fit to let his own actings with men, whether of mercy or judgment, go on in the ordinary course of natural causes. And he is pleased to act by those natural causes as the ordinary means, accepting and reserving to himself, nevertheless, a power to act in a supernatural way when he sees occasion. Now 'tis evident that in the case of the infection, there is no apparent extraordinary occasion for supernatural operation, but the ordinary course of things appears sufficiently armed and made capable of all the effects that heaven usually directs by a contagion. Among these causes and effects, this of the secret conveyance of infection, imperceptible and unavoidable, is more than sufficient to execute the fierceness of divine vengeance, without putting it on supernatural or miracle. As it brought the people into public company, it was surprising how it brought them to crowd into the churches. They inquired no more into whom they sat near to or far from, what offensive smells they met with, or what condition the people seemed to be in. But looking upon themselves as so many dead corpses, they came into the churches without the least caution, and crowded together, as if their lives were of no consequence compared to the work which they came about there. Indeed, the zeal which they showed in coming, and the earnestness and affection they showed in their attention to what they heard, made it manifest what a value people would put upon the worship of God if they thought every day they attended that church that it was their last. In the middle of their distress, when the condition of the city of London was so truly calamitous, just then it pleased God, as it were, by his immediate hand to disarm this enemy, that poison was taken out of the sting. It was wonderful. Even the physicians themselves were surprised at it. Wherever they visited, they found their patients better. Either they had sweated kindly, or the tumors were broke, or the carbuncles went down, or the inflammations round them had changed color, or the fever was gone, or the violent headache was assuaged, or some good symptom was in the case, so that in a few days everybody was recovering. Whole families that were infected and down, that had ministers praying with them and expected death every hour, were revived and healed, and none died at all out of them. Nor was this by any new medicine found out, or new method of cure discovered, or by any experience in the operation which the physicians or surgeons attained to, but it was evidently from the secret and visible hand of him that had first sent this disease as a judgment upon us. And let the atheistic part of mankind call my saying what they please. This is no enthusiasm. It was acknowledged at the time by all mankind. The disease was enervated and its malignancies blent. And let it proceed from whencever it will. Let the philosophers search for reasons in nature to account for it by, and labor as much as they will to lessen the debt which they owe to their Maker. Those physicians who had the least share of religion in them were obliged to acknowledge that it was all supernatural, that it was extraordinary, and that no account of it could be given. I wish I could say that as the city had a new face, so the manners of the people had a new appearance. I doubt not but that there were many that retained a sincere sense of their deliverance, and that were heartily thankful to the sovereign hand that had protected them in so dangerous a time. It would be very uncharitable to judge otherwise in a city so populous, and where the people were so devout as they were here in the time of the visitation itself. But except what of this was to be found in particular families and faces, it must be acknowledged that the general practice of the people was just as it was before, and very little difference was to be seen. Some, indeed, said things were worse, that the morals of the people declined from this very time, that the people, hardened by the danger they had been in, like seamen after a storm is over, were more wicked and more stupid, more bold and hardened in their vices and immoralities than they were before. But I will not carry it so far neither. I wish I could repeat the very sound of those groans and those exclamations that I heard from some poor dying creatures when in the height of their agonies and distress, and that I could make him that reads this hear, as I imagine I now hear them, for the sound seems still to ring in my ears. If I could but tell this part in such moving accents that should alarm the very soul of the reader, I should rejoice that I recorded those things, however short and imperfect.
Narration taken from Daniel Defoe's A Journal of the Plague Year.